this. Okay, so hi, I'm Kathy Turnbull, and this is Turnbull's Threads. This video is going to be a video talking about what I have done so far this year. So kind of a quarterly update because, yeah, we tried January and then February and March just kind of went whoop. So I'm gonna do a quick what I've knit this year so far. Talk a little bit about the projects that I'm currently working on, and I think that's where I'm gonna go with this. I'm not gonna talk about new things that I have purchased, new things in my stash, just because I have so much. And I do have like an ongoing subscription to a yarn subscription, so I get new yarn every month anyways, and I don't want to talk about it unless it's in a project, because it's like, oh, this is nice yarn, I like it, it's pretty, but I don't have anything for it yet. So I want to first figure out what I'm going to do with it before introducing anyone to any new yarns that I have. Okay, so first things first, what I have managed to complete so far this year. So in addition to doing fiber arts, I do some calligraphy and watercolor. So I did get one done. Yay! I do have another one that's in the works. Another two actually that are in the works. I've been very lax about this. I've been knitting much more than I've been doing my calligraphy and art, but I do have one finished. So one down, many, many more to go. In addition to that, I have 2 dishcloths that I have finished this year. One was my first attempt to do the videos, and then I realized that all of the videos that I had taken in introducing knitting and how to get to knitting were out of focus. So we did another one so that you could actually get some hopefully in focus footage of me teaching people how to knit. So basically the same pattern, different yarn, 2 dishcloths. Yeah. One of the things that I have been so far most proud of this year, though, is this next thing that I'm showing you. So this is not knitting, this is Swedish weaving, and it is a Swedish weaving woven blanket. It was so many hours, so many hours. I love it. It's beautiful. I do plan on doing more of them. And if people are interested, I am more than fine with like going through and like doing a video of kind of how you go about doing it. But it took forever. This has been probably a 3-ish year project. Partly because I was doing other things, partly because this is Louisiana, so like limited time to actually work on things like blankets and things. I can do pieces, but actually like finishing things up takes a while because I have to wait till it gets cool enough that I am not going to die when I start piecing together my blankets. Important things. So something like this where the fabric is all one piece of fabric and it lies on your lap as you pull yarn through it. Not fun in the winter. So I did finish it. It's gorgeous. I love it. It's mine. This is not ever getting a new home. This is mine. So yes, one of the things that I am most proud of finishing so far this year, because it took forever. Then let's show the 2 winter knits that I finished so far. So I finished my first sweater. Yeah, it's gorgeous. It's like this, so I have sort of a moral defect with it because I did decide to take a lighter base yarn. So I have a lighter Sandis Garn-Sunday wool in like a light green color, and then I overlaid it with a mohair that's more of a emerald teal color, so that it ends up being this like really nice forest green color. And this is Oeko-Tex, her book Knit This, I believe is what it is. This is one of her patterns from it, the Ivy sweater pattern. So it has this really nice lace yoke area up top, and then it goes into stockinette stitch, and you end with ribbing at the bottom and ribbing on the sleeves, and the sleeves kind of taper down. It is a lovely pattern. I highly recommend it. I do have a couple of things that I did differently with it, and probably if I were to do it again, I would do a couple of things differently, like with the sleeves. I don't necessarily like how they turned out just doing it a single. I would probably double it over like she has you do for the collar, just to give it a nicer look for my personal preference. Other people may like the way it is just fine. Just me personally, I would like it doubled over. So, slight things that I would change with it, but love it. Love the sweater. I've worn it several times so far. Gorgeous sweater, gorgeous pattern. Highly recommend. And brings me to the second sweater. Same designer. She actually had a knit along in March, which I kind of participated in, so I didn't get all of the yarn that I needed for it until mid-February. So it was like a February through the end of March. I didn't finish mine until like about mid-April. But I really like how mine turned out. So it's once again kind of the marled effect. But this time I used a light cream base alpaca yarn. I know you're not supposed to use alpaca for a sweater, but I did. And I blocked it and it turned out fine. So, so I used an alpaca base with a, like natural wool color with a aquamarine mohair on top of it. And this particular pattern has so many cables, a lot of cables. It's really pretty. And I did do some editing to this one too. So the neck is like she did it, but because of my experience with the previous sweater with how the cuffs turned out, this one I actually doubled up the cuffs myself and knit them together so that they it was a double, so I knit twice the length and then doubled it, and I really, really like how that turned out. I did a little bit of change at the bottom with the waist shaping so that I came in a lot closer at the bottom, which I really liked. It made it much better fit. I also made it a little bit longer than she suggests in the pattern because I like my sweaters long. I like a lot of my garments a little bit longer. And then I did like the pattern, but I do think that the sizing is a little bit off. So with the instructions in the pattern, I was supposed to be knitting a large, which is what I knit, and that was a little bit too big. So I would say err on the side of being a little bit smaller. The bust size, which is what the pattern is based off of, was probably about right for the large, but the rest of it looked like it made it look really baggy. So I would have probably knit a medium instead, which would have been a little bit tighter up on the bust, but I think it would have looked better. So like if you're going to do this particular pattern, which is the Arctic Lights pattern, sorry, by Sweater-Veronika, and I don't know how to pronounce her last name. But if you were to knit it, I would suggest potentially going a size smaller than you think you might need to be. Like if you're at the lower end of the large size, you might want to knit a medium instead of a large. Just because it is, if you don't do some adjustments, it will look a lot more baggy on you than going to expect. Which thankfully I was fine with this one, but it will, yeah, you want to pay a little bit of attention with that. The next thing that I knit was some more summer weather friendly things. So I have a book that has a bunch of tanks and tunics in it. And I have a bunch of cotton silk linen yarn that I am using for knitting these up. And yeah, so I finished my first one, which was this guy, which is gorgeous. I love the pattern. Once again, I altered it because I could. So I think with this one, I didn't do too much alterations until we got to the sleeves. So for the sleeves, I did do fewer runs because I could tell from like the picture that it was going to be a little bit lower on the armhole than I wanted it to be. So I decided to make the sleeves just a little bit shorter. So I took out basically one repeat so that it would be shorter. It brought the front of the blouse up a little bit too, which I prefer. And I really like how this one ended up turning out. I will mention that when I was knitting this, so I bought all the yarn all at once, and I didn't pay attention to the dye lots, which I should have paid attention to. So the first two skeins that I used were all right. They were the same dye lot. It was fine. They look exactly the same. You can see them at the bottom, perfectly normal. But one of the skeins that I bought, that dye lot was a lot darker than the other two dye lots were. So the other two dye lots are like about the same color. One dye lot, totally different color, which is why you can see striping in this pattern. So I had started knitting with it, and then I was like, wait a second, there's a big stripe. Are they different dye lots? Yes, they are. Are they significantly different colors? Yeah, it is. So because the final skein that I had was basically the color of the other two, at that point I was like, okay, I am not going to undo all of the work that I have down there. Ain't happening. So instead what I'll do is I'll alternate the last two skeins that I have so that you end up with kind of more variation up top, and then it stripes out. So the final half of the sweater is a little bit more stripy than the first half of the sweater. Yeah. So word of warning, don't forget about dye lots, even in like really common popular yarns, because this was not hand dyed. This was from a pretty reputable company, Lion Brand. So Lion Brand yarn, they had some significant differences in at least one of their dye lots. So if you are buying yarn for a project, if you can, do try and get the same dye lot. If not, pay attention to the yarn before you're halfway through your project, so that you can start alternating your skeins at the beginning, so that it looks more planned than like you get halfway through and you're like, oh yeah, should have done that. Another thing with this one was it did turn out a little bit larger than I wanted it to be at the beginning. So because it's cotton, I can't put it through the washing machine. So I put it through the washing machine and dryer, which means that in the future this should be perfectly machine washable, dryer safe, in order to shrink it a little bit so that it, like, because the armholes were a little bit too low and it was a little bit too loose in the bust, and that shrunk it up just enough. So now it is the perfect fit. Really like it. Looking forward to wearing it more this summer, spring, whatever. That brings me to my last one. So same book, another tank. This guy. Oof. I really like this one because it took like a week to knit instead of a month to knit, which most of the other ones have taken about a month to knit. But because this used such, it used super bulky yarn actually, and large needles, it meant that it went really fast, which I appreciated and enjoyed. Did some new techniques with it, I think. I did a provisional cast on for the first time for this one, because the lace portion down here is knit, so you knit the lace portion like this, right? So it was all knit in this direction for the lace portion, and then you join it together. You could do either their grafting method or using the Kitchener stitch. I use the Kitchener stitch. And then once you had that circle, you then when it, so because I used the Kitchener stitch, I used a provisional cast on method. That way I could actually join them together. And then once you have that circle done, you go ahead and you pick up stitches, which I've done previously, but not for a full garment. You pick up the stitches and then you knit up to the yoke area, split for front and back. There's a couple of short rows in this, and then they actually want you to do they wanted me to do a 3 needle bind off for this guy, which I did do with the other sweater. First time doing 3 needle bind off. Like it, enjoy it. But I didn't want to do it for this one, so I went ahead and Kitchener stitched it because it, like at this point, it's just stockinette stitch for the arms. For the other tank that I did, like, it made sense to do a 3 needle bind off because there's a very distinctive pattern, and Kitchener stitching it doesn't make quite as much sense. But because of how this one was, and because I did some changes since, yeah, I didn't follow the pattern really. Like, I did, but I didn't. So in the lace section, I did less lace sections than even the extra small ones, so I had less stitches that I picked up for the body, which meant that my sleeve shaping and armholes were different than the pattern. So I ended up actually accidentally going a little bit short in the front, and because I went short in the front, I changed the back. So the back, they just basically wanted to make the back piece and then so or 3 needle bind it off together. Yeah, didn't do that. Went to the back, added some space so that I actually had an armhole that would fit. It's important if you want to actually wear things. Then Kitchener stitched everything together instead of 3 needle binding it off, and then finally did their collar thing, although instead of 1 row of purl stitches, I did 2 rows of purl stitches. So yeah, it looks like the looks kind of like the picture in the book. I kind of followed the instructions a little bit for the most part. Same idea, right? So yeah, that was this one. So that is all of my finished projects. So I'm very, very happy with my finished projects. It's looking at that stack of things that I've like done so far this year. I'm slightly impressed with myself. I've been doing much knitting. But that brings me to things that I'm working on. So for things that I'm working on, I have a sewing pattern that I'm working on right now. This should be coming out in a video, I guess, because this is my first time really sewing a garment. I've done a couple of accessories where it doesn't really matter if it fits or not, or if it's exactly like the pattern says, but this one is going to matter a little bit more because I am planning on wearing this. So yeah, been working on this. I have pieces cut out. Now I need to get my sewing machine out and actually sew things together. So that is one project, and that's actually a part of a larger group of projects that I've been working on. So basically knitting through the last century, kind of in decades. Which reminds me, that first sweater that I showed you, this, let me grab it. This one. So this was actually my first part of that series. So I might have enough video to do a little bit of this as its own kind of separate video. But I'm basically taking a pattern, or this looks, yeah, I am talking while trying to do things. This is a problem. Okay, there, things are in a pile again. So I'm basically one pattern that was made in each decade till the 1900s. So that was my 2020 pattern, knitting pattern. The sewing pattern that I just showed you was my 2020 decades sewing pattern. Which leads me to the next project that's a work in progress, which is this one. So this is the Mantilla Stole. It's a pattern from the 2010s. And I have started it. Haven't gotten very much of it done yet, but I've started it. It's a very lacy pattern, which I enjoy, but it is very, I have to be concentrating for it. So I see, yeah, you can see how lacy it is. So it's gonna definitely need some blocking when I get finished with it. But because it is a lacy pattern, like, I can't be watching any videos. I can't really be conversing a ton with it. I have to be fairly concentrated. I can listen to audiobooks. But yeah, this is not a put the TV on and let's watch a little bit of TV while knitting this. No, it's a little too concentrating for that. So, that is one of my works in progress. It's been started. I don't know when I'm gonna finish it, because I also have another thing that I've been cast on for my works in progress, which is this bad boy. So this is another t-shirt from that book that I've been working through, trying to get a bunch of more summer knits, I guess, done. And this one actually has a pretty interesting construction. So it's like a front piece, and then the back pieces will cross in the back and come up. And yeah, I have part of the front done. This is kind of one of the first times that I've really done this, where I'm using my stitch markers to help me keep track of how much I've knit, right? So whenever I do a decrease row, I've been adding a stitch marker, which, thank you to all the knitting bloggers, etc. out there for suggesting that I do this. I should have probably thought of it myself, but I didn't. So going ahead and using stitch markers every time you decrease, that way you can keep track of like how many, because the pattern tells you like repeat this 13 times. So you could count the stitches, because they do give you the final stitch count. But it's also helpful to have these so that you know when you're kind of coming up on your last decrease, so that you're prepared to transition into the next. So, yep, that is my final, well, it's not my final work in progress, but it's the final work in progress I'm going to share, because it's the last one that I've really worked on this year. I'm trying to keep it so that like this year is implied. I do have a blanket that I will pop up a picture of over here. yeah. So this is a blanket that I'm currently working on piecing together now. I had some visitors in February, well, in March. I had some visitors in March. I finished knitting it in February. I had some visitors in March, and so it got put up, and it is currently in a big pile in this room. Yeah. Needs to finish getting pieced together. So hopefully that will get done soon. But yeah, that particular project, I am not going to try and show everyone except for the picture that is there, because it's a big project and it's in a bunch of pieces, and the pieces currently work on the backing that I have, and they will stay there in their correct spots, but I really don't want to try and piece it together again. Like, I did that. That's why it's on where it is. So we're not gonna show and tell that one. And then I have 2 watercolor prepped. I have one background finished and one just stretched out, that I will be working on probably this month. That I'm not going to show you plain water. Be like, look, watercolor paper that has been soaked in water and taped down. This is so interesting. Don't you want to know more about it? Yeah, so I have 2 watercolor calligraphy things that are in progress, but not completed. And then I have a bunch of knitting and sewing, etc. projects that I have been, well, not working on this year, that I have left over from previous years, with an emphasis on the years. There's a couple that I started last year. I have some cross-stitch projects, but I haven't worked on them this year yet. So once I work on them, I will show you the things that I worked on this year. I figure that's a fair assessment, because I have a bunch of UFOs, unfinished objects, floating around various different places, and yeah, some of them are unfinished because I don't know where the other pieces are. So I have all of the pieces except for one, and I don't know where the one piece is, and I don't feel like ripping apart my house in order to find the one piece right now. So we're going to not rip apart the house currently. We're going to work through some of the projects that I have first, that are readily accessible, and I know where everything is, before destroying my house to find the pieces for the one project that I know I have somewhere. I know it is in my apartment. That's as far as I've gotten. I know it's in the apartment. They got put up because I had visitors, and I don't know if other crafters have the same problem as I do. Some of them have very beautiful places that look incredibly well organized. Yeah, no, that's not me in any way, shape, or form. I have things everywhere, and like different projects, different times. So whenever I have visitors over, right, you have to clean up everything so that like they have places to sleep, and it's nice looking. Well, nice looking. It is relatively uncluttered within my house when there are visitors here. Which of course means that I put things away, and then I forget where away is for things, and then I have to find them again. Yeah. So I have a variety of projects where I need to find the pieces that I have lost. And I have a bunch of projects that kind of are taking higher precedence because I have the pieces. So I'm going to try and finish them, maybe. Or get distracted by new projects. That also happens. So yes, now that I have rambled on and on about how unorganized I am, If you enjoyed this, please let me know in the comments, because yeah, I feel somewhat the fool doing this. But that is my finished objects and my works in progress for the last quarter of a year, because as I said, February, March kind of skipped, and so all of the footage that I had from January, and a lot of it was out of focus, so we're trying this again. But if you enjoyed it, feel free to subscribe, like, do all the things that you can do, that you want to do. I care, but I don't. And if you have suggestions or things that you want to ask or things that you want to see videos of me doing or explaining how to do, feel free to put them in the comments below. And until then, I guess I will see you in another video in the future. Have fun and enjoy the rest of your day.